for breathing lessons with Susan Kay, helping you learn how to breathe and release those beliefs that have been binding you so you can just enjoy life and breathe easy. Breathing lessons with Susan Kay.
Hi, we're back today with breathing lessons. My name is Susan Kay. We've been talking a lot about orphan culture as it relates to Christianity, deconstruction, those kinds of things. Today, and actually last week, I kind of moved away from that a little bit. Today I want to talk about something that is helpful when it comes to working your way out of orphan culture. And actually, if you want to look at orphan culture and you want to see orphan culture, you want to understand orphan culture, just look around you. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. Go to the grocery store, you'll find orphan culture. You'll find people who are angry or people who are displaying a type of mindset that says my way or the highway. It's all over their cars. It's all over the news. It's all over in our Congress. It's all over, and I'm not just talking about one side or the other. It's just everywhere. It's all over in our culture. So last week, I was speaking with someone who brought up the subject of radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is something that I've really been trying to practice for the last 2 years. I really started understanding radical acceptance, when I recognized the world is just crazy. We have so much hate and anger in the world, and it's not going to get any better unless each of us, becomes responsible for ourselves. But what does that look like? We can talk about personal responsibility. And growing up the way I grew up, personal responsibility was, you do all the right things and you don't do the wrong things. I don't think that's what personal responsibility is. I think personal responsibility is taking responsibility for your own internal being, your responses, and how you see the world, and whether or not how you see the world and how you respond to the world is actually making the world better or worse. So today we're going to talk about radical acceptance and what it is and what it isn't, and how it changes us, and how I think it changes the world. So here's my definition of radical acceptance. I have it written out here. Radical acceptance is the practice. And I want to stop on the word practice because it is not something that's a one and done. It's something we practice every day. It's a way of working with ourselves, to change ourselves, to become more balanced in the world as we look at the world and respond to the world. So it is a practice of allowing and accepting otherness in the world. So radical acceptance is the practice of allowing and accepting otherness in the world. So I'll give you an example of this. So back when the election was happening and there was a great deal of civil unrest, lots of civil unrest. And I'm sure every town in America had this going on. One day I was behind a truck in my town, and it had the flags and it had symbols on it that, in my way of thinking, appeared to be anti-otherness. We'll put it that way. And I got very angry and upset. And all of a sudden this idea came to me of, what if I look at this truck and think to myself, I acknowledge what I see. I accept what I see. And I allow this person to do what they're doing. So I did that. I don't know if I said this out loud in my car, and if somebody watched me talk, that's fine. But somehow within myself anyway, I thought, okay, I acknowledge what I see. I acknowledge that this person is expressing themselves as to what they believe. I acknowledge that. I accept what I see is me thinking I accept the fact that this person has the right to have this stuff all over his truck to let me know what he thinks. And then I allow it. And it was funny because when I got to allow it, it was almost like, I'm not going to make a thing out of it. This is one of those subjective things that you think happens that, might be interesting. He started down the road. He that was his turn to leave. And it was fun. And it's like I got to the point of allowing it, and he just drove off. And it was symbolic to me. It was like, and that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. So it's allowing and accepting otherness in the world. Otherness is what we don't want. The last video I made, I talked about, and it was funny because I didn't expect to talk about it. But I talked about when we look out at the world, we're actually looking to see ourselves mirrored back to us. And when we do not see ourselves, but we see something else, it unstabilizes us, it destabilizes us, sometimes it makes us feel frightened. If nothing else, it makes us feel invalidated. I don't know why we're like this. I think we were raised to be like this. I think if we were raised with radical acceptance, we would not feel this way. We would not be so frightened all the time and so afraid of everything. But that is the way we react. That's the way we respond. Is that, and I'm going to be really honest, I have been exposing myself in the last few years to things that make me uncomfortable, and because I'm practicing radical acceptance. And radical acceptance will require that you become uncomfortable. So I was watching this documentary of a certain group of people in our culture who dress differently. Their whole way of moving in the world is completely different. Their expression in the world is totally different. And I could feel my body tensing up. And I could feel constriction in my body when I was watching this. And I said to myself, what is that? And all of a sudden I thought, I'm really afraid. If I encountered that person on the street, I would immediately feel fearful. And I remember my response to this, watching this, was I just started crying. Because I realized that person was not doing anything to make me feel fearful. It was completely and totally my own response. Because of my social and cultural conditioning, that's how I responded. And it really kind of broke my heart, because I thought, because I recognized that societally, how this group of people are responded to in this way societally throughout our society, the same way I was reacting on the inside. We're afraid. We are afraid. It gave me compassion for not only the people that I was responding that way to, but it gave me compassion for the rest of us who respond that way. Because it broke my heart to think that we have actually been raised in orphan culture to the point where we cannot allow others to express themselves in ways that we don't understand. Because we don't understand something, we immediately fear it, and we immediately resist it. Let me put this in another realm just to give you an example. Let's say science. Let's say these scientists have this theory down, and they're locked into this theory, and then somebody comes along in the science community and unlocks that theory and says that's really not the way it is, and they have scientific proof to change that, to shift the perspective on that. And you will find scientists over here resisting this. And the reason I'm putting that in such an academic way is because I want to show that it happens in every realm. It's not just the woo-woo stuff. It's not just the middle of the road stuff. It's in every realm. It's in the academic realm. It's in every realm. It's in the religious field. It's in the medical field. Is terrible that way. What is that? I begin to identify in a certain way about myself, about what I believe, about those things that I have solidified within myself. And when I look out in the world and I don't see that looking back at me, I become fearful and I become resistant. So that's not all my definition here. So radical acceptance is the willingness to look out at the world without the need to force others and or events to align with one's own worldview or desire. This can be as simple as, so I'm going to take this in all different ways so you can see how it shows up. So I'll just give you a simple example of things that happened to me this week where I had to practice radical acceptance. And this is how simple it is, and this is how down to earth it is in our lives. This isn't about some massive self-realization thing that happens, at a retreat. This is what we do every day, all day long, where we can practice radical acceptance. So I was part of our staff at work, did a whole big CASA event. We did a Seuss theme, we made truffle trees, we made all kinds of cute little arrangements. We cut out Seuss figures, we put them on sticks and put them in the arrangements. We made a balloon decor thing, big one in the room. We did a photo booth with Seussy looking things you could, it was fun. It was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work. And our CASAs have been locked down for 2 years and we have not been together. This is the first event where we were all going to come together. I was quite excited. Everybody at my staff, I think, got tired of me being so giddy. But I was very excited about this because it was cute and it was well executed and it was over the top, and it was a way to us to really show how much we appreciate our CASAs. So I was running around town doing things, and the day before the event, there were some items that we didn't have that we needed. So I went out. I said, I'll go grab them and I'll come right back. So I went out and grabbed these things, and then I encountered a truck and trailer tractor thing overturned on a overpass in our town with alfalfa bales all over the road. And so here I am stuck in traffic for probably 25 minutes at least, because there's just the smell of alfalfa all over in the air, and there's just green stuff flying, and people are trying to get this stuff back together, and the truck is tipped over. I don't know if somebody got hurt or not. And I got very stressed out because I thought, here's the staff waiting for me to bring these items back to get this done. And here I am stuck in traffic. And I had to, at that moment, I had to stop and say, okay, I need to practice radical acceptance. I see what's happening. I acknowledge what's happening. I accept what's happening. I'm stuck in traffic, and I allow what's happening. That took all the stress out of my body, and I thought, When I get there, I'll get there and it'll be fine. So that's what happened. So then we put the event on, and so the event was last night, and we opened the doors, and we had about half the people come that we thought were coming that had actually RSVP'd. And there was this moment in the evening where I felt disappointed. And immediately, at that moment in time, I recognized that I had to practice radical acceptance. So I thought, I acknowledge that I'm disappointed. I allow myself to be disappointed. I accept the fact that I'm disappointed, and then I'm going to allow myself to be disappointed. And then I'm also going to acknowledge the fact that this didn't happen the way I wanted, and accept the fact that there are not that many people here, and allow whatever happened to happen. So these are the ways that I practiced radical acceptance last night. And it took away, so I'm going to talk about this later. So just put a pin in that right now. And it is the ability to embrace discomfort for the sake of internal and external peace. And that seems like the opposite of what we have been taught about internal peace and external peace. We have been taught, whether we have been taught literally somebody telling us this, or it's just the way we've been conditioned in the way we do life, that my peace has to do with the fact that I'm comfortable, and that the external world is what I need it to be. That is what we have always believed peace looked like. Whether we wanted to say that or not, it doesn't sound good to say that. We don't want to deny that's the way we've been thinking. But it's not, it is the way we've been thinking. So we spend our time trying to change everything externally so that we can have peace internally. And that is not the way it works. The way it works is to accept the discomfort in the world that we're experiencing, accept it completely, allow it to be what it is, and therefore we end up with peace. Radical acceptance takes down the need to save others. So I am a CASA, and I supervise and train CASAs. And one of the things that I deal with CASAs, and myself too, is this whole idea that we cannot save these children from pain. And it's an acceptance that we have to make within ourselves in order to be effective as CASAs. If we're out trying to save all these children, we will be ineffective, because our sensibilities, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute too, our sensibilities are skewed. Again, we want to create peace for these children actually so that we can feel better about ourselves. We don't like to look at the world and see pain and suffering, especially when we somehow equate it back to ourselves. Radical acceptance takes down the need to change others. Changing others has been, part of because I was in the church and because I was part of Christianity, changing others has just been, it was huge. Your whole existence as a Christian, a lot of Christians, some Christians won't agree with this, but a lot of it is, making the world what we want it to be. Changing the whole social construct of life so that it reflects back to us our faith and what we believe. And when we couldn't do that, we were being persecuted. So that's going to come up here in a minute too. The other things that radical acceptance takes down is the need to force life circumstances to be what we want them to be. We cannot control everything. Okay. So radical acceptance, when you're truly practicing radical acceptance, you will stop storytelling. So what do I mean by that? Okay, let's go back to Casas not coming to the party. There was just a split second in me before I practiced radical acceptance where I wanted to create a story around why these Casas had not come. And all of these stories that we create always have to do with personal validation. Most of the stories, I won't say all because I'll probably find a way for that not to be true later on, but most of the stories we create around a lack of acceptance have to do with our own validation. So the story I might have created about Casas not coming to the party or not showing up is that they just didn't appreciate what we were doing. That would be one. Or they don't take being a Casa seriously. That would be a massive judgment, wouldn't it? But instead of storytelling, because if you start storytelling, that is proof that you have not accepted. You're not practicing radical acceptance. The minute you begin to tell a story to yourself about whatever it is you're unwilling to accept, that is a tell that you have not accepted it and that you are not practicing radical acceptance. Because radical acceptance will take down all the stories. You're not allowed to tell yourself a story. What the story was is, I don't know why they didn't come. And I'm sure there was a million reasons why they didn't come. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they had their own lives. Maybe somebody got sick. Maybe they had a flat tire. Maybe they just looked out the window and said, I just can't do this today. Who knows? It had nothing to do with me. Oh, I could talk about personalization, personalizing everything and making everything personal. Radical acceptance does not allow us to make everything personal. So the next point I want to make about radical acceptance is that it changes our sensibilities. So I just mentioned the whole idea that we personalize everything. Everything becomes a personal affront. So I'm going to talk about that for a minute. When I was in the church, when I was a full-blown, fundamentalist Christian, everything was personal. Because, and I'm going to say this, and this is going to be controversial, I know, but it's because I had a personal God. When my God was personal, that means my God was entrenched in every little behavior I did and and it was all about the externals. But he personally was offended or happy with me. He was either happy with me or he was offended with me. And then I began to internalize that, and that's the way I looked out at the world also. I looked out at the world the way my God supposedly looked at me. So because God was either happy with me or offended by me, or just needed to change me in some way because I just wasn't perfect yet, that is the way I would look out at the world. And I would see, and you take all this stuff I just shared about otherness, there could not be otherness in the world, or I was personally frightened, offended, maybe felt persecuted by it. Why? Because it was not reflecting back to me who I thought I was. And who did I think I was? Somehow I thought I was a soldier of the Lord. And that, my way was the right way. My belief was the right belief. And all of this and then we become sensitive. Our sensitivities become heightened and they're personal. We become personally sensitized to all this stuff in the world that does not agree with us, that makes us uncomfortable. And then we become attackers. We become storytellers. And if you want to look at think about the storytelling going on right now in the world. There are stories about, well, I'm not even going to say it, but watch the news and listen for the stories. There are stories going on. There are conspiracy theories going on that are just these big, huge, made up, weird stories about things that have no basis in reality. And even if some of them are true, the people who are telling these stories can't change it anyway. So, but they become personally sensitized to the stories they believe, which we all do. It's not just them, it's all of us. We all do this. And because we're personally sensitive to all these things, we become the ugliest part of ourselves. We become the thing we are judging. We become that other person out there who... And so that's what we have in orphan culture. That's what our whole society is anymore. And why? Because people do not understand how to accept and allow otherness. We just can't do it. We don't know how to do it because we've never been trained to do it. To me, breathing lessons is about how do we start breathing again? What do we have to do to find our breath and find that space in that cavity in our chest to breathe and to let go of all the things that we have been taught, that we have practiced, that's literally choking us to death and creating a lack of harmony in the world. Okay. When we practice radical acceptance, there is a balance that comes into our lives that I know. Now, here's where this is going to get interesting, okay? This is where it's going to get interesting, and that's why I'm shifting in my chair. The things that used to bother us don't bother us anymore, and new things bother us. The things that were intolerant to us, such as someone believing something I don't believe, or someone dressing in a way that I wouldn't dress, or someone having a certain flag in their truck, or whatever. People expressing themselves in ways that we don't agree with. When we come into a space of radical acceptance where we can let go of all this intolerance for people who we don't understand. It's not even about agreement. It's about, I don't even understand what these people are about. Okay. That doesn't mean you can't accept the fact that they are there and they have a right to be there. And it doesn't mean you can't just allow it to be what it is. That's acceptance. Just I'm going to allow people to be whoever they are and however they are. There is a caveat. We'll get to that in a minute. When we take down our intolerance for our personal irritants. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am a person who has come from a family where we're bothered about everything. I mean, I've had, I don't accept it anymore like I did, but, I've had a lot of anxiety. I've had, people things bothered me a lot. I'm still working on some of that. I still have a hard time going into spaces with people I don't know because I'm afraid. I still have a lot of fear about what people are going to say to me or talk to me about, or it's weird. But anyway, that's just my own personal junk. But, and I came from a very religious background where everything was wrong, and anything that was not what was in our little tiny world was wrong and was fought against. So that's where I came from. And I was there for, not for the whole 52 years. I think that there was starting a lot of deconstruction in my life for the last 10 years before I actually left the church. But, so I know what I'm talking about. I'm an expert in intolerance. I really am. And so, when you begin to practice this, there's this shift that happens where you become balanced. So I'm going to make this statement, and I'm going to qualify this statement. So the statement is that radical acceptance is not the willingness to tolerate injustice when we have the power to change it. Now I'm gonna make a caveat to that. Whatever we are trying to change in the world, because there are things that need to change in our world. Systematic abuse, inequities, intolerance, those kinds of things. But when we're fighting something, even if it's injustice, if we're fighting it from a place of a lack of radical acceptance, I know this is weird, we are still unbalanced and we are still unhealthy. When you get balanced out by practicing radical acceptance, then you, and only then, can you work for a better world. You can work for equity. You can work for, but you work from a place of impersonalness. And I know this sounds weird, but I am not offended personally. Radical acceptance will take us from the place of what offends me to what is offensive for the we. Practicing radical acceptance will give us a new lens on the world. It'll take the small me out of the picture, and I don't have to be offended by everybody and everything. I don't have to walk around with a chip on my shoulder thinking that if somebody does something or says something that isn't something I particularly care for, it's because they're somehow attacking me. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. When I let go of my personal God, and I've realized that, and I do believe there's a God, but I believe that God is impersonal. And what I mean by that is there is no way to offend this source, this energy field, because it's more of an energy field. This is my opinion. And see, if you don't agree with me, you have to practice radical acceptance. And does it have intelligence? I believe it does, but there's no personal, because there's no ego. There's not that ego thing. So when we practice radical acceptance, things become impersonal to us. If I see somebody walking down the street expressing themselves in a way that I don't understand, it no longer affects me personally. I can accept it I can accept the fact that that's who they are. Even if I feel some fear, because that thing does not go away easily. I can recognize it as fear and say, oh, well, I feel a little fearful about this. Why? Because I don't understand it. Poof. That's it. Then we can work for the betterment of people. We can work for the betterment of all from a place of non-personal involvement. I know it's weird. I want you to think about all this for the next week or two. I'd love to hear in your comments what you think of it. Am I there yet? No. There are days I don't do well. There are days I get irritated. There's just, but that's why it's a practice. Nobody arrives at this. Nobody becomes, a radical acceptance guru. If you find one of those, run. There's no guru. There's no person that knows how to do all this correctly. Why? Because we've been saturated in that other thing. And the funny part of it is just when you think you've just come to this place, and you'll find another way in which you're doing the same thing. So it's not about coming to some place of total, Shangri-La. It's about just practicing. How am I doing today? Am I practicing radical acceptance? Oh, I didn't practice it yesterday, and this was the result, and I can see that. What is that? That's progress. When you don't do it correctly, or whatever that means, I don't know if correctly is the right word, but when you forget to practice it, and then later you see that you forgot to practice it, that in and itself is part of the practice. So it's not about coming to some place where you never judge other people, or you're never irritable, or you're never in a place of non-acceptance. We go through that all the time. It's about practice. So what's this got to do with, fundamental Christianity and orphan culture? It has everything to do with it. And I want to explore some of these things with you. If you're ready to change your life, if you're ready to respond to life differently, if you're tired of your own crap, this is good. You can get there. You can start practicing something else and finding a new way to live. So I hope you share my videos. I'm doing this to gain an audience because I think I have things to say. I do. Share my video. Like and subscribe. And give me some comments. I haven't been as good about watching for comments as I should be. Part of that is because I do work a full-time job. But I will be watching for your comments on this one, particularly breathing lessons. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Breathing Lessons with Susan K. For more breathing lessons, stay tuned to this channel and learn to breathe with Susan K.